Star Wars 1 or Star Wars A New Hope Episode 4, like when I was a kid, it was just Star Wars. That was Star Wars, and then the next one, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. My DVD copy, where it's like the bonus disc, George Lucas trying to stack the deck, because it's like you got 2 discs. One of them is like the special edition version, the version that we all know, like that you can't find anything, but you can only find the special edition version now. This was like one specific DVD issue where you had the special edition disc, and then you had the disc of like the original cut where they did no touch-up whatsoever. It's just whatever that print was like, that's what it is. So
I'm jealous you have that.
He's trying to game the system because the special edition is very crisp, and then the other one is very grainy. And so, but again, it's like, do you love the grain or not? You know, like I would like to see just like a really, like a high definition, like what Giles Martin does with the Beatles.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, he modernizes it, makes it up to like audio visual standards of today, but still keeping as much of like the warmth and the feel and the spirit of like
the original.
That original version is not available anymore, and so it's like, I just see it's a 70s movie. It's got a 70s like, and when you see it with all the grain and stuff, it really drives home that yes, this is a 70s movie. And which I mean is great. I love. But it's got like a warmth. The colors are very warm. And then when they made these special editions, it is super crisp. They blew it up. Like they make it blue. I guess because it's like they cool them down. They cool it down. They add a lot of blue. So this is like very blue compared to what I was watching was very like orange and yellow, and this is very blue.
That's such a great point, because like one of the things that I'd like, I'm not into about like space movie sci-fi is the coldness, and I always felt comforted by that. I was the warmth of Star Wars.
That's what makes
I felt like it was a space movie that was somehow warm,
like
and cuddly and cozy.
The characters are like characters like you can relate to, and they're and they're funny and goofy, and they're not like austere and stuff like they become in later Star Wars movies. So I also watched like original of Empire Strikes Back, and again you compare because they went so blue. So the Hoth scenes on the special edition are like Hoth is blue. It's got a bluish hue to it, but the original it's white. Hoth is white.
Yeah, like, and even in those scenes from Empire Strikes Back, the white Hoth, like it reminded me like on when you're out playing in the snow when you're little and it's hot out. Mm-hmm. Like a sunny, it was still warm. Right.
Sun's shining. Taking out a DVD and putting it in feels like such a hassle. It's so funny because like we went through the era of like rewinding a VHS and stuff, but now it's like, oh, what a hassle to have to put it in.
When I put the DVD and I was like, I had to work out, like pump some iron to get my arm to rake.
Yeah, R2, the blue parts of R2 are black in this, where they were like blue in the version.
You are right. Like how
they increase the contrast of it to screen the original, because it's gonna kind of blow your mind. Like it's so grainy.
Oh my god!
It's gonna blow your mind how grainy it is. But again, it's like it's like the grain of like, oh, I'm watching a movie now.
The VHS rewinder, like, you know what? I'm gonna go on eBay and see if they have remember the Corvette rewinder, like the red car rewinder.
Yeah. I've been watching a lot of like the sequel trilogy stuff, and because it's just so easy to just like pull it up on Disney Plus and stuff, and and that stuff, like the Star Wars logo is like razor sharp, and it just looks a little bit wrong. And then watching the original, and it's like, it's got a little, it's not like a perfect logo. It's not like a perfect vector, Adobe Illustrator drawn. It was like somebody had to like get like a ruler out to,
Also I don't know how it was on that DVD, but like when we watched this one, it has the 90s 20th Century Fox like digital logo.
That feels weird.
Old school?
This is it was almost like George Lucas is punishing you. He thinks he's punishing you, but he's actually giving you something so great. Where I think I paid $35 for this set, like in the aftermarket, because I passed it up the first time around. it's like they just dumped, the copy that they had, they just dumped it onto a DVD, and here it is, warts and all. But again, it's, it's pretty delightful.
Yeah, with like the opening of Star Wars, I think, Tom, the 20th Century Fox logo to Lucasfilm to the Star Wars logo, with the edit and the overlap, like where the Lucasfilm logo overlaps with the 20th Century Fox music, then the cut of the Star Wars logo. That's like, the movie hasn't even started yet, and that's probably one of the best moments in like movies.
Well, and that was what got him in trouble with the Directors Guild, was because you're supposed to present your credits a certain way before the movie starts, and he has this presentation again that makes it stand out. And when that spaceship comes, when the Star Destroyer comes in, and it's like, whoa, this thing's just going and going, and like we know the Spaceballs joke of like, of like the ship that keeps going, but it really like it really does.
I can't wait till we cover Spaceballs on here.
It was getting me in the frame of mind of like the era that it came out of, that it is a 70s movie, and how fun it would be. It's like the 70s, and you go in a movie theater, and there's like all the kind of 70s kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
You can watch like Saturday Night Fever or something. And then this, But it got me thinking, there's that scene, it's up now, where Han Solo is like bluffing, like he's got to like get on the radio and say like, we're all fine here, how are you? And I realized like, oh, this is 2 years after Saturday Night Live starts. He's doing Chevy Chase. He's doing the Land Shark where he's like, Candy Graham, and like he's doing that voice. Like I think he's like consciously, and I'm thinking like part of this Han Solo performance, I think he is kind of doing a Chevy Chase. He's like, dude, I'm Han Solo and you're not. Like
he falls off like a stool, like Gerald Ford.
Yeah. We look at Star Wars and it's like, we've kind of bought into it as this like alternate universe that we're just seeing a little peek into this alternate universe. But it is like a 1970s movie made in the 1970s.
Chewie gets in a fight with him and calls him a medium Talon. He's like, Chewie's like,
but yeah, like that jumped out to me. Like he is doing the Chevy Chase,
that's amazing,
Land Shark voice.
When we started the movie, I was thinking, because we were talking in the last Star Wars episode, or one of the other ones, that George Lucas, what you were mentioning, he was making a literal straight up a comedy.
Right, yeah. And
I was going to try to watch this with that
in mind. Like if it's a comedy, so how'd it go?
You know what? I was picking up on those notes, Tom. You're like...
Well, when Luke first meets C-3PO, and then C-3PO, and he's talking, and he's like, kind of waves him up. Like it's pretty great. But like the comedy, like there's comedic bits, who's going to drive it, kid? You? And then he's like, we don't have to take this. We can get a ship for that. And he starts to get up, and then, Ben Kenobi pushes him down. Like a lot of funny stuff. But when they get into the Death Star, and like as soon as Princess Leia shows up, the comedy, it goes into overdrive.
Yeah.
Like it really kicks into gear, and it does
what a trio.
It becomes a like. Because, like, when this movie came out, a lot of people were like, oh, it's like a Marvel comic. It's like the kind of bickering and joking that, like, the Fantastic Four does or whatever. But it's also, it becomes a 1930s screwball comedy where it's like Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, and Katharine Hepburn, and it's like, and it's like, okay, is she going to end up with Jimmy Stewart or Cary Grant? And she, hitting them with these barbs, they're throwing it back and forth,
We go back in time in the DeLorean, and we do like a pre-Star Wars starring them.
Yeah, and even right, yeah, like of the period. Like if this is supposed to be like a 1930s serial or whatever, you get some. But she, and that haircut too seems like it's built for comedy. Also, but yeah, I just go back to like Mark Hamill saying when he was reading the script, he really was genuinely not sure if this is this a comedy or is this a spoof of Flash Gordon, or is this like
serious?
The acting is really good too. And another thing that struck me watching this, because you have all the set pieces, and again, it's like you go from one bit to the next. It's like there's not a wasted frame. There's no boring part. Like I kept thinking like, during one of the boring parts, I'll do this or that. No boring parts. But like the things that were jumping out to me was, you have all these stunts and things like that. But then there'd be these like human moments that like just enough. Like George Lucas is such like a robot. Like he is like I think he is like just a robot. Like, but he knows like the way a robot knows. He knows you have to have like a little bit of like humanity in this, and so he puts like a minimal amount, but it's like it's perfect. It's just enough. And so these little moments. So there's like the moment where Alderaan gets blown up, and then Ben Kenobi kind of feels it and he gets a little woozy and he has to sit down for a moment because he's kind of overcome by this like this sensation that he's getting of people screaming out in horror. And then like Luke kind of comes over and is like kind of checking on him, like making sure he's okay and stuff. And like that moment stood out to me this time. Acting and stuff, it was like very tender little moment in among all this like sensationalism. And it's like, yeah, that really, those little moments that are peppered through the movie are kind of what sells it. Like it keeps it from being like you said, a cold kind of sci-fi.
Even like the classic trash compactor scene.
Yeah, the trash
is cozy.
It's like you kind of want to play in there. Like it doesn't look like gross garbage.
No.
It looks almost like a pool. But also the garbage and stuff is very gray in this. In the original version, it's more greenish.
Yes.
It's got like it's just a warmer across the board. Like even the cool colors are warm in the real version, not this synthetic version that is like the only one you can get, the only one we've been watching for you. And I thought when they sold the rights to Disney, like when George Lucas sold everything to Disney, I thought like the first order of business was going to be a release of like, here it is, here's the original version, everybody, the one you've been wanting that George Lucas has been keeping, but it still hasn't happened. They still haven't released it.
Well, come on, George.
Well, George isn't involved anymore. Like, come on, Walt. You know, like they yeah, come on, Walt's frozen head. They've had several several DVD and Blu-ray releases of like the original Star Wars movies, but none yet that even as a bonus feature that includes the original.
I think we mentioned this before on the show, but like I have that VHS trilogy.
Yeah.
And it says on the back, it's like the last time you'll be able. It was like a warning on the back.
Yeah, they weren't fucking around. Yeah, and he got that from Disney. Like Disney would talk about like, oh, it's going back in the vault and stuff. To kind of make your thing feel more special. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the conspiracy theory I heard was that George Lucas is so angry at his ex-wife.
I've heard
that he, that he's made it like, and that was part of his contract with Disney that you cannot release the original version because then his wife will get a residual payment from it.
I think that might be the answer.
But I mean, it's got to be contractual. It has to be contractual because like Disney, there's no reason they wouldn't put out
He's talking to Walt's head like
Kylo Ren talks to Darth Vader's helmet.
The head is like berating him and stuff.
I was, the trench run is so interesting too because the movie's basically over. Like in screenwriting terms or whatever, like once they get out of there, okay, like the movie's over.
Yeah.
But to tack on this other thing, and like so much, so much credit to George for doing because it's so like unconventional. Like you really could have ended the movie and then just gone straight to like the awards sequence or something. But like you have this whole other thing, and it is. Like, it doesn't follow any kind of, like, rules of cinema. Like, they're all just in these spaceships. Princess Leia isn't there with them anymore. And kind of, like, withholding Han Solo. And it just really, like, nails the movie. So, like, you take Han Solo away for a while. And then, like, when he shows back up...
I, like, pop completely.
Yeah.
Dude, the ending of this, like... I get goosebumps. I remember, I remember my parents
works every time.
They,
you know what?
Enraptured by it.
When the Death Star blows up, the explosion's so great in like the original version.
I know.
And I want to barf when I see like the over CGI'd explosion.
Yeah, the ring that comes out.
The ring that comes out. I want to barf.
Yeah. Makes me want to fucking puke, George.
The interpersonal dynamics like really work well in this too. Like Harrison really, like Han Solo really does feel like he's like an older brother and he's kind of like needling Luke a little bit. And so then when he's like kind of disappointed in Han Solo, it does feel like, you know, somebody being disappointed in their big brother. And then when he like comes back, and
he like whenever Luke was in that compactor at the very end, I always forget, but I notice it every time. It becomes like sleek and cool Luke. He has his hair slicked back. I'm like, he should
Gordon
rock that.
Gekko.
Yeah, Gordon Gekko Luke. I'm like, maybe you should rock that. It becomes like cool Luke. It becomes like a different type of move because it's so comedic with his
hair,
his feathered like.
Now here's something also when I was watching it this last time. Ben Kenobi turns off the tractor beam. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And then there's like he turns off the power to the tractor beam. And then the stormtroopers come in. And then he turns like another knob the other way. And like I always took it to be like he was turning it back on for a minute so that if the stormtroopers looked over, like the beam might be too thin or it might be like turned off or whatever. And so I thought, oh, he's turning it back on so that these guys will think it's okay. And then he's going to turn it back off. But he doesn't turn it back off when he steps out. So like I thought, oh, did I just read that into it? Like maybe he's not turning it. Maybe he's just turning another dial that keeps turning it off. And because it's not like he turns it down and then turns. Like I always thought there was a scene where he turns it down and then turns it back up. But it looks like he doesn't. See, look, like I thought this was him. Like, oh, I'm gonna turn it back on because these stormtroopers are here.
Yeah,
and then we'll cut to him go and turn it back. But he doesn't. He just like leaves. So I'm like, oh, maybe I just read that wrong because you know.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't go like he just leaves. So I guess he is just turning everything off. Like and so that's like an extra bit of business that I always like. Every time I've watched this, I thought I was seeing, but this time I realized it was all just in my head.
Tom, he spends too much time. He's like, did I turn it off or turn it on?
Right, yeah,
and
like the gas
thing. And then he's like off, on, I don't, and he like falls into the bin.
Well, yeah, there is still some tension because like maybe because like the characters are all wondering maybe he didn't turn it off. So I don't know, maybe it's building.
It's like, oh shit, did I turn it?
Okay, so Han Solo's chasing them, and then. You know, the original version, he corners them and stuff. But then in this version, George Lucas is like, oh, we got to have a big army. So watch. Then he gets here, and then it's an insert. See that?
Oh, I want to fucking barf. I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, that's the insert.
Oh, that's...
Yeah, I mean, so you watched this with Greedo shooting first.
Oh,
nasty. Yeah, like, because this one, I can't do it. Like, I can't, like, if I'm going to watch this, I have to get out my DVD. But that's why I usually end up watching the sequel trilogy more than I do the original trilogy because I don't feel like getting the DVD out. I don't feel like getting the DVD out, and I certainly don't want to watch
Greedo shoot first. Dude, that's kind of why you're right. I kind of like
or the bantha go.
Oh my god!
You know, thinking about when we were talking about like, oh, is there a draft of The Force Awakens where it's like Tatooine and Yavin instead of Jakku and the other worlds they come up with, like. That's another because there's the scene where Finn is like drinking out of the same water as this like big like beast.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, like that was supposed to be drinking out of the same water as a dewback.
Yeah.
You know, like that would have been so much that would have resonated so much more if it was a dewback rather than just some random
You see those CGI dewbacks combing the desert?
Yeah. I think like with the Mandalorian, they were kind of like, okay, now we are just gonna like it is just gonna be Tatooine. And stuff.
I love this stunt too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she gives him the kiss for luck. It does
like French kiss for the cross.
The action. Well, they do in Empire, which was a lot closer to Jedi. Like the pacing is like a Flash Gordon serial because it does break into action in like similar intervals, you know, where there's kind of like, okay, some dialogue, and then a fight breaks out, and then this part where he jumps through, like I always love that. But there's all these little bits of business, and man, you know, again, like hats off to George Lucas for like sticking with it, because I mean, everybody must have thought he was nuts with all this stuff, but it's like there's all these little details, like Han Solo jumping through, like you gotta build this door
closes.
Yeah, and like you're building all these cool sets and things, and like try to get the most out of, like imagine building like a door that does that and then not having a moment where like one of your characters jumps through it. it's one of the coolest parts of the movie is just that simple thing of him jumping through there. That was something I feel like they got like sort of right on for the Rise of Skywalker, like the third in the sequel trilogy, of like, yeah, let's set aside some real estate to just have our characters running through corridors and jumping up and down and looking at that like scuffed floor of Elstree Studios.
Oh, we love the visceral and physical and practical stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you're right, Tom. I need to get my hands on a despecialized version of this.
I mean, they're still out there. I mean, again, I paid $35. That's a lot of money, but it was worth it to me. And I wouldn't be. I'm sure you could find it for that.
I'm tracking it down.
I just don't get all these people who have like their criticisms of the first Star Wars. To me, it's just so perfect in every respect. But people are like, oh, this is the worst lightsaber battle in the whole series. And it's like, it's so good and it's real. And then like somebody made their own like hyped up version of it with like all the comments are like, oh, this is so good. Finally it's done right.
I like how the lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan and Darth from Star Wars is being shit on.
And of course, like, story-wise, it's like, oh, well, they're old men at this point. Like, they lost a step. That's why they're, like, doing flips in the air in, like, the prequels. But after the movie came out, it's like, oh, how come there isn't a scene where Luke Skywalker goes up against Darth Vader with a lightsaber? Like, he's the hero. He's got the... And, like, on all the posters and stuff, he's got that lightsaber. How come he never goes up against Darth Vader? And it's like, okay, well, that's first order of business in the sequel. Like, in the comics, there'd be scenes, like, one of the first comics after the movie came out, there's, like, a scene where Luke Skywalker's imagining himself, like, lightsaber battling with Darth Vader.
Getting ready for the battle.
Yeah.
I love stormtroopers, like, how they look when they get blasted. Like, that like, the stormtrooper hit is great.
There's all these spoofing of this is so, cliched at this point, but it's like, there's the scene where Obi-Wan is like looking at the destroyed sandcrawler and he's saying, these are too precise to be sand people. Only stormtroopers could be that precise. And then every stormtrooper is like shooting everywhere but where...
Couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah.
Like, that cracks my ass up that Ben Kenobi is putting over stormtroopers' target practice. Like, there's...
and then there's this like tender moment, like just like a quick one where Luke's bumming out about the death of Obi-Wan and Princess Leia is kind of putting a little blanket over him and so, like, just these little...
It's cozy.
Yeah, you don't need much, but you need some, and they took all that out. Han's like, come on, buddy, let's shoot it out. And it's like he's getting approval from his big brother and stuff. It's fun.
Those like the padding that's on like the seat cushions, I'd always would think like, Luke, don't lay down.
Right, it's kind of grody looking.
He wakes up, his face is all broken out and stuff.
Yeah. I never thought I'd be smuggling myself.
Another great scene, like, this is a crowd pleaser. The Star Wars arcade game.
On Luke's digital display when he's shooting in the Millennium Falcon, and then the symbol for the TIE fighters are these little triangles flying through space. So I wonder if at that point when they did that effect, if is the triangle just like a direction indicator or whatever and whatever, or did they think that maybe they'd be shooting at some triangular spaceships?
Oh,
and then in his X-wing, when he's shooting at the TIE fighters, he's shooting at TIE fighters that have like the straight up and down wings, but then the graphic on his thing is like the Darth Vader TIE fighter shape. So I wonder if, like, again, it's just a symbolic notation, or if like that was maybe like meant that was going to be what he was shooting at. It was one of those like bent wing TIE fighters.
Before all the ships and everything and like the universe like expanded out.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I remember when there was regular straight wing TIE fighters, TIE bombers, and Darth Vaders. The four types of TIE fighters. If I'm in the other, like, these guys are firing and then I'm in the other one, I'm like, guys, I'm not following the I can't figure out where they're at. I don't understand.
Don't get cocky. Hey, kid, don't get cocky. I thought that was hilarious when I was a kid.
Oh, loved it.
That cut of C-3PO in the wires that kind of like nails the joke or whatever, that was originally from earlier in the movie. That was like when they're having that fight in the rebel blockade runner, and then the stormtroopers and the rebels are kind of shooting it out with each other, and then C-3PO and R2-D2 go through this door in the hallway, and then there's like an explosion. That was going to be the next shot. You'd see like C-3PO like covered with like spaghetti wires and stuff.
The funniest line delivery by C-3PO, I think, is from Return of the Jedi. He's like, "My eye," when Salacious Crumb's eating his eyeball. What a great shot! The cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. Yeah. This is so good. You know what? If I was going to, I'm trying to think if I was going to cosplay. I mean, I would want a full Chewie costume, but I would go Han. I like that white, like, long sleeve with the vest. Mm-hmm.
I think with the facial hair, you might look more like Scotty on on the Next Generation episode where he's wearing like a Han Solo up.
James
James.
If I don't stop eating these like little Debbie, I'm on my way. I'm already halfway to James.
We've crossed the doing line. And the scenes where
you've heard the Burnley line, dude. When do I hit the doing line?
You know, like when they're flying towards the Death Star, and you know, there's that seam, that like meridian that runs through the Death Star. Like if you read Star Wars, whatever, like that's not the trench. Everybody thinks that's the trench, but it's not the trench. But it actually was intended to be the trench, and that little meridian that you see is the trench that they're flying through. But then at some point, somebody did the math and realized like just how vast this trench would be. You know, if the, you know,
I always thought that was what they were.
It's
flying.
not. It's like if you look at like maps and stuff, you know, there's like this little tributary that comes off of it that's supposed to be it, but the original intent was the trench. It's just like after the fact, somebody did some math and realized that
would be too big.
It would be way too big. You'd be like, okay, there's the one side of it way over there. There's the one, you know, you basically have like a couple cities worth of space in between.
They go down in the trench. They're like, hey, this is pretty easy.
No big deal, yeah.
Their blasters can't reach them.
I also, like, everybody gets... Like when you're paying attention to that trench run, everybody's getting, there is like a drama going on. You kind of have to watch it a million times, and you start getting all the beats of it. But there's like, and when Luke went on this mission, he did not go into it thinking like, oh, like he's just kind of there as like, oh, an extra guy or whatever.
Yeah. Oh,
it's just everybody else got picked off except for, you know, this sort of younger generation. Like 3 of like this younger generation are left. It's him, Biggs, and Wedge, and then Wedge takes that hit and has to like leave, and then Biggs' ship blows up. When Biggs' ship blows up, he's like, there's this moment where he's like, wait, I don't, you know, like something at the last minute goes wrong, and then his thing blows up. Like this time around watching it, I was wondering like, oh, is Darth Vader doing the Force on his ship? Or whatever, and that's what kind of fucked, you know, where it's like, hey, wait, my ship is acting weird all of a sudden, and then it blows up. Like, and like Darth Vader, you know, when he says like the Force is strong with this one, when he's trying to get Luke Skywalker, maybe he's trying to do the Force on Luke, and it's just not working because Luke is like, you know, pushing back.
Dude, that graphic is so sick.
Great graphic, yeah, early CGI, and the thing I always thought too, because like people would say like, how come that vent is like unguarded? You know, where you could get a missile down into it. And I thought like, oh, well, maybe it had a grill on it. And then that guy who says, it impacted on the surface. Maybe he blew up the grill. Maybe it blew up the grill. And then now it's like open wide for Luke to, you know, drop his little thing in there.
We assumed the guy that blows up 3 Rivers.
Yeah, like, it impacted on the surface. There's all those guys dressed in their flight uniforms, and one of the guys in that crowd had like started doing like the autograph shows and conventions and stuff, and like he was getting bullied by like the other guys who had like a speaking part. They're like, you're just an extra, we had a line, and like it's
holy
like there are people strata. Yeah, there are strata. People are like, Hollywood is such a stratified thing. They're trying to enforce strata even of like, Hey, I'm a much more important random, X-wing pilot than you are. How dare you, sign your autograph when you're just you don't even have a line. I felt bad for him. He seemed like a nice guy, and those other guys putting on airs.
If that's the case, Jack Porkins is like the I don't know. He's like a Brad Pitt level.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah. I mean, he's
He gets hit and he's like, ah, and it goes on for like 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
He's like, ah.
Yeah. The trench run so good, and the source of it was Dam Busters. There was like this movie, The Dam Busters, and George Lucas was like, hey, let's do that, but in like a space movie. How cool would that be? And he's right. And you do Dam Busters side by side with it. It is pretty.
It's like a 1-to-1. Yeah. Dude, I was thinking about like how if I was an X-Wing pilot or flying a ship in this, how my death or blow up would go, because they always do the sparks that come in, but everyone says like some weird thing or does some kind of weird thing. I gotta figure out what I'm like. I get hit. I'm
gotta be ready for it. Yeah, like maybe that's a thing at Disney World. There's like a photo op, or like where they'll shoot like a little video and then text it to you or whatever of you like dying in the cockpit.
Because the one guy in Return of the Jedi, he's like,
so here this is part of the special edition where he gets a little moment with Biggs, because when Biggs dies originally, it's like he's just one of the random guys or something. It's only if you had read the novelization or seen the comic to know who Biggs is. When he dies, and Biggs is kind of like his last connection to home.
He's like.
So yeah, he gets it. And when I saw this in the theater, this like special edition version, I was like, I did not like Han Solo stepping on Jabba the Hutt's tail. I didn't like Boba Fett spiking the camera, but I was like, yes, I like seeing the little bit with Biggs. I understand why you cut it out though, because it does kind of give it down. This movie just is relentless. Just has this continuous forward momentum. It's got a ton of like overdubbing in this movie, like we talked about that.
We love that.
Ton of overdubbing. The one I was really feeling it was the scene with Luke on Tatooine in that little arched area, the breakfast nook, where they're drinking the blue milk and he's like pushing around his eggs in the Tupperware and stuff. Uncle Owen, I don't think that's a voiceover. I think that's the guy's actual voice. Like I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but like I hear a little bit of because there's a very specific acoustic to that arched area, and so I hear it in Uncle Owen's voice. I hear like a little echo. I hear it in Luke's voice, and then Aunt Beru's is just like, Owen. He's like it's such a bizarre alien voice. Like I want to hear Aunt Beru's real voice. That June Foray or whoever's doing the overdub is like it hits you over the head. Yeah, because if you look at if you do lip reading while you're watching, a lot of these Lord Vader and all the escape pods seem to like you get this like guy in doing in a little sound studio in like a little radio studio in Hollywood or whatever. But like you see like a lot of like spittle flying and stuff.
Just go down sweeping the chimney on the Death Star. It's like a Death Star Cockney chimney sweeps. Lord Vader. They were sweeping the exhaust port. We won't be able to reattach the covering for another few days. Some chimney sweep leaves the cap off.
Like everybody's name kind of tells you like what they do, who they are and stuff. And so Biggs is like the big man on campus who comes back with his cool looking uniform and stuff. And Luke's like, well, this is in those like scenes that never made it into the movie. And then, but then I was thinking Wedge is kind of like a wedge. He's kind of like, getting in there and like giving Luke some space. It's like, okay, we need a guy to be a wedge to kind of give Luke a little breathing room from these these TIE fighters. What do we call it? Okay, wedge.
They're flying, and I like float up beside them and
flotsam.
Spittle reporting.
Yeah.
TYRD turd reporting for duty.
And then just it's like 1,000,000 to 1, and then Luke, like everybody dies. Luke never thought it would just come down to him. All of a sudden, it does come down to him. He's the last guy, and then he decides to like turn off his guidance computer, and it's like, well, now we're just completely fucked. And then the power of friendship, his buddy coming in to clear the way for it, and then him communing with this, all-powerful force of the universe, and does something that it was like a suicide mission. It was, the odds were, it's same. Like the thing you compare it to is like Lord of the Rings. In Lord of the Rings, they always talk about that. They would talk about that throughout the story of like, it's like a fool's hope. They're on, they're going, they're walking across like a razor's edge. There's like, it's most likely a suicide mission, but it's the only hope we got is this like very slim hope, and then boom, he's victorious, and then Frodo hope against hope, gets that ring that despite every obstacle, this ring does end up in the volcano. Just all these little bits that come together perfectly, and so much thought in every aspect of it, and the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Man, that CGI is sticking out like a sore thumb.
This version of Star Wars that everybody's been watching for the past 30 years is a pile of shit. Like, it really sucks. Yeah. Like, you got to watch the grainy version. Those, like, Y-Wing fighters, when I was a kid, like, I didn't even know those existed. Because, again, like, how many times must I have seen Star Wars? Not very many as a kid. Before having like a VCR and stuff, and then how many times as a little child had I watched it all the way start to finish? So it's like I knew about X-Wings, I knew about TIE fighters, but like the Y-Wings, I kind of didn't know about until like Return to the Jedi. Then Return to the Jedi, you get more of a sense of like all those like other ships.
The B-Wings in Return to the Jedi. Yeah. You still, you see the toy, then you're like, well, I better go try to find that in the movie.
There was like a spaceship toy that like another company made that like, it wasn't Kenner, but like kind of looked like the Y-Wing fighters. And so, when I was, so it was kind of like, oh wait, they actually have something like that in Star Wars. When you play like the Star Wars video games and stuff, then like you get to spend a little time in the different ships. It's just the X-Wings, the iconic one,
In the video games, the Y-Wing's always like the slowest and like more armor plated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they give the bad guys on the Death Star all the goofiest helmets too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the Rebels have like their equivalent of that. They have their big, and it's supposed to be kind of like feudal Japan kind of style or whatever. We've watched it a million times and have all kinds of feelings and associations with it. And then it's been the larger culture has sort of, picked it apart and stuff. And one of the things I read in like an early review of Star Wars when it came out, and again, it's also interesting just looking at it as a movie. Like, try to put out of your head all the other Star Wars, just view it as a movie. But there was like an early review of Star Wars that said like, oh, it's interesting at the end of the movie, you get this hint that meet the new boss, same as the old boss, that now that the rebellion has won, that they're starting to tilt towards fascism as well. With that big, military parade, that big, ceremony at the end feels very like sort of fascistic and stuff. And so maybe it's like a little thing of like this cyclical thing of, and that like the dangers of, militarization, and that like, you defeat one tyrant and then like maybe they become the new tyrant, or what, they become the new empire. The rebellion becomes the new empire. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is really interesting.
I do like maybe that's there. And again, maybe something's not the intent of the author, but maybe it's just kind of in there, stuff just kind of creeps in. But I thought it's kind of like they're all Lucas and Spielberg and De Palma and stuff, like it's like that, it's the film school generation, and they're watching all kinds of stuff, and it's just kind of like, okay, what can I take from this that's like perfect for this moment, and what can I take from this and I think for Lucas, he was probably just like, it's like they watched a lot of Leni Riefenstahl or whatever, and so it's just kind of like, oh, what would be perfect right here would be, this big fanfare and this and that, and not kind of maybe not giving a lot of thought to like the larger like implications of just kind of like, okay, this, just sort of like this kind of technician kind of stuff where it's like, oh, this would work, really well right here. Because that's another thing with
interesting.
But I mean, like Lucas was a political thinker, and he would talk, that politics were on his mind with this. But I mean, he is also kind of a technician, so I don't know if maybe some of the stuff was just kind of sneaking through, that he wasn't really just kind of like, this is Star Wars Star Wars 1 or Star Wars Episode 4 or whatever. But this is definitely part 1. Like we'll come back and talk about this movie.
Oh.
Well, yeah, again and again. Maybe next month.
Yeah,
or maybe next week or something. But like we could go on. There were a couple things that on this particular watch that came up. So it was like, oh yeah, Harrison Ford as Chevy Chase.
That's.
I feel like nobody else has hit on that.
I've never heard that.
But it's like that voice.
Great.
That voice he puts on of like, we're all fine here. How are you? Like, it's the Candygram.
Well, and on your next watches too, try to think of the Gordon Gekko Luke. We need more Gordon Gekko Luke.
Yeah, how come? Because like we've seen a lot of different looks for the characters across the 3 movies, and then when they show up in the sequel trilogy. Like, yeah, how come there wasn't like a slicked back, the wet look?
The wet look.
I guess maybe if they were doing Star Wars movies in the late 80s, maybe we would have gotten like one where like it looks like all slicked back.
Because for just a second it takes you out of the 70s.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you are in the it's Fidel Sassoon. If you don't look good, we don't look good. So he's coming out of...
He's in the trash compactor. He's like, ooh, somebody threw away a can of half-used moose. Whenever he sells like the Jawas, like or when he's doing dealings with the Jawas, he goes greed is good. His hair is slicked back.
Yeah, when they get out of the trash compactor, it is like they just got a shower. Like they're like scrubbing in that shit water, the piss water. They're like scrubbing away in there. Because they do seem like refreshed and like freshly coiffed and stuff. This like I was watching, the original version when they have this parade, like when they're the award ceremony in the foreground, like they didn't have enough extras for it. So in the foreground there is like cardboard cutouts or whatever, where it's very clearly there are like these. It's not like Ralph McQuarrie or whoever. It wasn't like a matte paint. It was like a really shitty, like done right there on the set painting, like all out of and like for like some of the people that are in the crowd, like in the foreground. But in this version, they like replace it with like actual actors.
Man, I want that kind of like.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. You got to see that shot.
I was at the filming of Sudden Death with JCVD. John, they used cardboard cutouts for extras.
Oh, nice. Keeping the tradition alive. Again, all these little moments of humanity that's like coming through from like the acting and stuff. They're all kind of like giving each other nice looks.
There's this guy in the final shot over to the right of C-3PO.
Okay.
He's got like
he's like the bartender or something, like Old West saloon.
Yeah, he's the one throwing his weight around the convention.
Yeah,
bullying everybody.
Like everybody talks about like, oh, how come Chewbacca doesn't get a medal and stuff? But it's like there were a lot of people like Wedge isn't up there getting a medal either. It's Luke and Han.
I think they gave Chewie medals in Legos.
In Legos. Well, he also gets one in Rise of Skywalker.
Oh yeah.
At the end of that, somebody else was saying this, but if you look at Star Wars, like the first one, way more than any of the other movies, there's way more like characters, aliens, robots, and stuff just speaking like gibberish. Where you don't, like, either there's subtitles or like they don't even tell you, you just get the reaction. So it's like the Sand People, the Jawas, R2D2, Greedo, a bunch of the Cantina guys.
Ponda Baba from
yeah, exactly. Like it's like nonstop through this movie, and then when we get to the prequels, all of a sudden like Watto, all those Jar Jar Binks, like you do understand what they're saying. And so it's like, oh, maybe it's just George, like maybe it's just George is writing like bad dialogue the whole time. We just didn't know because we couldn't understand any of it.